There were several important years in Pattaya's history that were decisive. Today the year is June, 2021. Let's go back to 1767. The name Pattaya evolved from the march of Phra Tak, later King Taksin and his army from Ayutthaya to Chanthaburi, which took place before the fall of the former capital to Burmese invaders in 1767. When his army arrived in the vicinity of what is now Pattaya, Phra Tak encountered the troops of a local leader named Nai Klom, who tried to intercept him. When the two met face to face, Nai Klom was impressed by Phra Tak's dignified manner and his army's strict discipline. He surrendered without a fight and joined his forces. The place the armies confronted each other was thereafter known as Thap Phra, which means the army of the Phra. This later became Pattaya, the name of the wind blowing from the southwest to the northeast at the beginning of the rainy season. Tourism began during the Vietnam War, when American servicemen began arriving on R&R rest and relaxation. One large group who arrived from a base in Korat on 29 June 1959 and rented houses from Phra Sunthorn at the south end of the beach. Pattaya was a fishing village until the 1960s. On this stretch of coast there were only a few huts in the north, in the middle and in the east. The American soldiers saw this stretch of coast as paradise. Especially the friendly and revealing Thaigirls had done it to the U.S. troops. In contrast to the prudish USA, Pattaya was open-hearted and uncomplicated. Back in the USA, many soldiers told about this special place. The name became known in the United States and other parts of the world. In the following 30 years, Pattaya developed as an insider tip for tourists, adventurers and expats. Many adventurers and immigrants from Europe, India and the Arab countries now visited Pattaya. They set up small colonies, built the first houses, restaurants, shops and bars. Today you could say they sparked the first real estate boom in Pattaya. Pattaya additionally has massive population inflow from short-stay tourism from a lot countries. Likewise, more and more Thais are coming to Pattaya from the countryside. It had also spread in Thailand that you can earn fast and good money in Pattaya. Due to the first tourist industry, many people from the northeast known as Isan, the poorest region of Thailand, have come to work in Pattaya and accounted for census purposes in their hometowns. More and more residential buildings were built in the north, west and south of Pattaya. In the center, more and more restaurants, bars, massage shops and shops sprang up. Trade also flourished. A growing community of foreign retirees live in Pattaya. Thailand immigration has a special visa category for foreigners over age 50 who wish to retire in Thailand. Pattaya is attractive to many retirees from other countries not only because of its climate and lifestyle, but also because living costs are lower than in many countries. But Thailand was smart. In contrast to the USA and Europe, foreigners in Thailand could not buy a house or land. They could only rent. Even if bars or shops were opened, the foreigners could hold a maximum of 49% of the shares. So Pattaya could never be taken over by certain red light groups from Germany, Australia or Sweden. The Thai were always in control. The foreigners were always monitored. If it was violated, the visa could be withdrawn at any time and the people deported. In 1990, a street in the center of Pattaya, directly on the beach, was named Walking Street. This street and the name became world famous. In this street all sexual desires were fulfilled. Las Vegas was the mecca for gamblers. Pattaya and Walking Street was the place for people who wanted to have fun elsewhere. There was nothing that wasn't there. Tourist things they never saw in their life before. Pattaya has derived part of its reputation as a tourist destination due to the sex industry and the resulting nightlife. And this notoriety has influenced the city's evolution in many ways. Prostitution in Thailand is technically illegal but tolerated in most cities, including Pattaya. An article in the British tabloid The Daily Mirror 47 have described Pattaya as the world's sex capital, a modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah. This provoked anger from government officials as high up as Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. Pol Colonel Apichai Kropech, the Pattaya police superintendent, denied that Pattaya is a sex trade paradise. Upset about the British media's stories, he insisted they were fabricated. There is no such thing as prostitution in Pattaya. Thai ladies having sex with foreigners is their personal issue. If they like each other, I don't see anything wrong with what they do behind closed doors, said Colonel Apichai. Pattaya also has Asia's largest gay scene 42 based around Boys Town, the Jomtien Complex, and Sunny Plaza. The city is also famous for its flamboyant Katoi cabaret shows where transsexual and transgender entertainers perform to packed houses. In 2003 the Russians discovered Pattaya and they came en masse. Pattaya needed Russian speakers. The Russian and Thai governments agreed special visas and work permits for the Russians. For the next 12 years, Pattaya should be firmly in Russian hands. Now there are also immigrants from Russia. They open pubs, restaurants, bars and buildings for Russian tourists. This triggered the second property boom in Pattaya. They built large real estate towers, opened real estate agencies and sold or rented them to Russian tourists. The Russians are also getting into the red light business. Thanks to the special agreements with the Thai government, even Russian girls could now work in their own Russian bars. Pattaya only knew one way up: more and more real estate, more and more bars and clubs, and more money. More and more people who lived in Pattaya, and more tourists. 2015, the first shock for Pattaya. The Russian currency, the ruble, plummeted. The impact on Pattaya was great. 80% fewer Russian tourists. Many immigrants and property owners had to return to Russia. The incoming money from Russia was no longer even enough to live in Thailand. Many have had to sell their properties for half the value. All Russian real estate agencies were worthless and some were closed. For the property owners, there was no rental income generated by the Russian tourists. In 2016, Pattaya was lucky. The Chinese came almost temporarily in 2016 and took over from the Russians. Actually, only the fonts had to be changed. The Chinese government is issuing more and more passports for the people and sending them to Thailand. Given the size of China, you quickly knew that the current real estate offers would not be enough. And the Chinese come with money. With a lot of money. They were amazed at the low real estate prices, in contrast to China. Now the Chinese started buying. The third real estate boom began. The Chinese triggered the third property boom in Pattaya. Investors, developers from China, Singapore, Malaysia, and India came to Pattaya. Since millions of Chinese tourists were to be expected in the next few years, apartments were needed for rent and sale to the Chinese tourists. Further large apartment towers were built. Especially in the south of Pattaya, in Jomtien and Na Jomtien, large luxury residential complexes were built especially according to the wishes of the Chinese. In the first year, however, the Thai were not enthusiastic about the new tourists. They always came in groups, weren't particularly friendly, and they were loud. Even though many Chinese tourists were vacationing in other parts of Thailand, they all wanted to go to Pattaya to see this notorious road, walking street. However, these troops only walked down the street, did not go to any bars, and only took pictures and did not spend any money. Pattaya was lucky again. Word got around in Europe that the Russians had left Pattaya. Now more and more tourists from Europe came to Pattaya. These Europeans had fun in the bars and spent money. From 2018 to 2019, the attitude of the Thais to the Chinese changed. Now there were also younger and individual tourists from China. They came to Pattaya especially to have parties and to take advantage of the girls' services. In contrast to the Europeans, they did not ask about the price or wanted to negotiate. They paid for what was called. Suddenly the go-go bars were already full of Chinese men at 8 o'clock in the evening. On all the tables there were expensive whiskey bottles, as befits the state. The girls could help themselves. The money was stronger than antipathy. The number of Chinese tourists was always set higher for the future. It was calculated and dreamed that between 2020 and 2022, around 25 to 40 million would come to Pattaya. The future of Pattaya was made of gold. Nothing could stop Pattaya anymore. But the rise of Pattaya also had a negative side. Everything got more expensive. House prices exploded. The Thai baht got stronger and stronger. The tourists and the foreign residents got less and less baht for his currencies. The virus, which broke out in Wuhan, China, in October and November, reached Thailand in January 2020. To this day, no one can say how this virus, called COVID-19, came about. Did it come from one of the Chinese markets or was it an accident in a laboratory? From October 2019 to January 2021 there were hundreds of thousands of Chinese tourists in Thailand. Strangely enough, there were only isolated and very small numbers of COVID-19 outbreaks in Thailand in January. Thailand Pattaya. March 2020. Lockdown. Due to the reports and pictures from Europe, Thailand decided to close the borders on March 26 and impose a first lockdown. In the next 5 months, reliefs, openings and complete closings alternated. After only 5 months you could see the devastating effects, the missing tourists and the lockdowns in Pattaya. In the next minutes you can see how quickly Pattaya changed. The big and busy shopping malls 2019 and the shopping malls 2020. The busy streets, the beaches, the bars, the peoples. The city go from 100 to 0. Now it's June 2021 and everything is still closed. Tourists can only go to Thailand if they have booked expensive 14-day quarantine hotels beforehand. It was clear that nobody comes to Thailand unless they absolutely have to. Tourists certainly not. After 9 months, Pattaya looked like a ghost town. As always in the last few decades, the people is divided. 50% of the people accept the orders of the government. The other 50% ask how this should all go on. Without tourists, without jobs and without money. What's next with Pattaya? 70 to 80% real estate vacancy. The hotel and catering industry is down. Only the rich Thais have money. The middle class and the workers are getting poorer and poorer. All over Thailand, and especially in Pattaya, there was mass unemployment. Many Thais in Pattaya had no jobs, could no longer pay their rents and also no longer finance their livelihoods. At the moment the fun city Pattaya has fallen. More and more people left Pattaya and went back to their home villages. In their home villages they had at least something to eat and were able to help their families or friends in the fields and find some work. There were also relatively few infected people in Thailand. So everyone expected the opening in October 2020, when the main season for Pattaya started. But nothing happened. Thailand was too scared. News from Europe and the USA stirred up more and more fear among the people in Thailand. How long will it be before Pattaya die forever? The economic consequences of the 16-month tourism stops and lockdowns for Pattaya are enormous. Another problem are real estate loans, non-performing loans, as well. People can no longer pay their loans. Many people who know Pattaya from 2016 to 2019 will be shocked by these pictures. But this is the true situation in Pattaya on June 2021. Let's us watch the COVID-19 balance sheet from Thailand. Population. Infected people. People die. Lockdown time. Traffic fatalities in Thailand in the same period.